It's March 25th, 1911. It's a Saturday, it's payday, and it's 5 minutes to quitting time. It's probably springtime, and people are thinking about what bills they're going to pay with the money they're about to receive. And then there's a cigarette or a match or a spark. Nobody's entirely sure, but whatever it is finds the scrap bin on an 8th floor of a building described lovingly as fireproof. Within 18 minutes, 146 people are dead, mostly women, mostly immigrants, and many of them teenagers. At least 2 of them 14 years old. 62 of them chose to jump to their deaths rather than burn, and the 2 men responsible both lived and also walked out of courtroom, found not guilty, reopened their business 3 weeks later, and eventually collected $65,000 more from their insurance company than what their property was worth. And that shook out to around $445 of profit per body. Eventually, the entire architecture of modern American labor laws and workers' comp and commercial insurance, OSHA, all of that things would spiral from this tragedy. But how it unfolded and what led to the perfect storm of the fire in this building, we will get to all that and more on another episode of The Remedial Scholar.
That's ancient history.
I feel I was denied critical, need to know information. Belongs in a museum, bro. Stop skipping your remedial class.
Hello and welcome, young and old. I am the Remedial Scholar, Levi, and I'm happy you guys are here with me today. Also with me, one of my longtime friends, my bestest friend, I might say, my lawyer and trusted insurance man, even though I'm not technically under his umbrella, but it's okay. Welcome to the show, Colton.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now you know why I invited you, because we may have discussed it at a previous date. That's not to be thought about too much, but go ahead and share with the class why you are here for this specific episode.
Yeah. Well, so I'm not an actual lawyer. I just play one on TV, but my insurance experience should come in handy this episode.
Yeah. And he has been my lawyer since 6th grade, when I just automatically deemed him that one day. And it's just kind of been a thing ever since. So
I've been serving loyally ever since. Yeah.
Yeah, we go way back. We go all the way back to kindergarten. So
that's right. That is right.
All right. Well, it's going to be great. We're talking about some 19th/20th century terrible business practices and all of the great things. So I'm excited for you to have the 21st century insurance lens to view it through, because it's just a crazy perspective switch of like how they did things back then, before they were like, we should probably not do it so badly. But it only takes people to die every now and then. And
well, as the kids say, I think this episode's going to be lit.
Foreshadowing. Yeah. Well, the good news is that if people are listening to it, they can see the title and they know what it's about, but that's great. It's actually kind of funny though, because sometimes I'm like writing the episodes as if it's like some mystery that people aren't going to know what I'm talking about, even though definitely know what the topic is, because it's right there.
Building up to your grand reveal.
Newsflash, it was there the whole time. So yeah, we got a little bit of world building to do, because this disaster did not happen in a vacuum. It's definitely it's just a it's caused by the context in which it is. So we're going to set the stage to be that what would be the worst workplace disaster in United States history until we were in 2nd grade. And it's, those aren't mutually exclusive. We didn't cause it by being in 2nd grade, although one would make the case that I might have tried at some point, maybe 3rd grade for sure. But
4th grade. 4th grade was your best year.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's a different episode.
That So I had talked about this, the last time we tried to do this episode, with September 11th being on the record as the worst workplace disaster in United States history, which is unfair because it's like not the building's fault that happened. Like, like it
It's
was
yeah,
like, a thing that just happened because these people worked there. It's like, well, yeah. So I don't know if it should be on those kinds of lists, but it is. So
it's technicality for sure. But I will say those towers were a lot safer than some historical buildings that we may or may not discuss today, huh?
yeah. Um, yeah. So it's kind of crazy that it took 90 years from the story that we're talking about today before one of the worst events, like any just business setting, happens in the United States, and I'd argue around the world, but there's probably some workplace disasters in Japan in the 40s that were a little bit worse. But again, not because they were at work, but so we go to Greenwich Village in Manhattan, where a 10-story neo-Renaissance style iron and steel building with smooth brick exterior sits kind of in its own pocket of these similar type buildings that are built around the same time. And it was described as fireproof, which is true because it's still there. I mean, it didn't burn down. It just, there was a fire in it. So not really fireproof, is just more fire resistant, I guess. But yeah, so had a bunch of different offices in it. Like much of the many level buildings of today is, different floors are dedicated to different buildings. The top 3 floors of this building belonging to the Triangle Waist Company, who produced the shirtwaist, which was a popular blouse for the working woman who didn't, want to wear a dress to work because that kind of hindered their mobility. And as they were getting more jobs in the industrial sector, they got to move around a little bit more. And it was, I imagine it probably allowed them to not be as, like, just temperature wise hot because, you have a separation of garments now. So you got a little softer top. It's not a full dress, so it's a lighter material, I'm assuming, and airflow. I don't know.
I don't wear a lot of dresses, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, women's clothing in general is a mystery to most of us. So
Amen, brother.
yeah, but essentially, this building, this factory, was a sweatshop, even by the standards of 1911. And there were standards; they were just bad and very few, but they had some standards. And overall, this entire thing, all of the prime destruction of the event, all of the deaths happened within 18 minutes, which is pretty crazy. The full fire would continue, but all of the damage that could have been done to this company was done within 18 minutes. So the end of the working day for these people, it was the top 3 floors, 8th, ninth, and 10th, engulfed in flames, and then 146 people would die, most of them immediately, and then a few others later on due to various complications. Most of them were immigrants, most of them were women. But before we get to the fire itself and all of the legal upheaval, we gotta ask, how did we get there? And 1911, it seems like such a long time ago because it was. And life at this time is just on the end of what is called the Gilded Age, which we talked about before when the last time we tried to do this too, which is Mark Twain had coined this term, and it was around his time that he was describing. But basically, it was tough. It was hard for anybody who wasn't on the upper echelon of society. A lot of the business owners, the well-to-dos, and the politicians was a big thing that Mark Twain noticed. He was quite angry about Congress for most of the later years of his life, and he used some pretty colorful language and unique ways to describe how crappy they were, but I didn't have any of them prepared, so I can't quote him on it, but he take my word for it. But the Industrial Revolution and explosion of the United States in the world economy in this aspect was huge. People in the United States began working more and more of these industrial jobs because it just spread like wildfire, no pun intended. Uh, so this time was great for business owners. It was great for the wealthy. Now there wasn't that many of those. It was the top 1% that held 50% of the nation's wealth, which is, I mean, that's crazy. So long ago. That's
Yeah, some things don't change
yeah.
for the better.
We're going to find out that there's a lot of that. So that's exciting. Social Darwinism was in full effect at that point, with the rich being a big fan of this. They didn't have to help poor people because that would make them weak. They got to learn how to survive. So
Of
why would
course.
we, why would we help them? And then the government, not helpful either, mainly because a big percentage of them were friends with the business owners who already felt this way. Again, how crazy back
That
then,
seems
so long
so
ago.
foreign to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, workplace safety, pretty much a joke. The people who had to pay to make things safer would just rather not do that because it was cheaper that way. And labor laws routinely struck down because it was unconstitutional for the government to tell the businesses how to treat their employees, which there's a hint of truth in that, I'm sure, but also government does have a responsibility to the people who give them money all the time, to make sure they don't die because somebody wanted one too many sweaters made or something. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
I talked about this kind of sentiment in my episode on the Battle of Blair Mountain, which is coal miners in West Virginia who started their own little uprising. It was an armed uprising, and there was guns and airplanes dropping grenades and stuff on people. So it's pretty intense, which is, it makes sense because they're coal miners and their life sucked and the companies owned basically everything about their lives. So yeah, you're going to get
There
a
you
little
go.
violent about that, but it's kind of the entire working culture was rough. By 1900, 35,000 workers died per year in industrial accidents, which was the highest in the world, which is, we're number one. And these,
USA.
yeah, and these people obviously, getting paid pretty well to work in these crazy abhorrent conditions, right? They had to be. Why would you subject yourself to? Uh,
Great money.
Most of them worked 14 to 16 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. Less than half of working Americans earned a wage above poverty level, and there's no disability, no minimum wage, no workers' comp, and no liability for the employers either. And most employers, had they actually been sued, managed to fend off the lawsuits with a trio of legal defenses, which are known as the unholy trinity defenses. And you know a little bit about this. You want to share with the
Yeah.
class?
Yeah. So again, professional experience is commercial insurance, which includes workers' compensation. Now, uh, I just went over this in my last continuing education class. So it is presumption of risk, right? if it if it's risky and you're doing it anyway, well, you're assumed to know the risk.
Yeah.
You have contributory negligence, right? So if you're even 1%, if you contributed even 1% to your injury, they were able to deny 100% of the damages. And then, yeah, when we went over this, fellow worker, fellow employee, I think there's a different term for it.
There's a nice term, fellow servant.
Yes, fellow servant. Yes. So yeah, me, the employer, I didn't hurt you. It was your coworker. Go sue them instead.
Right.
And so yeah, all these were borrowed from our English law system, which I mean we still have, right? But they were not yet reformed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it just really was a nice little way for companies to just be like, look, obviously we didn't do any of this. Look at Exhibit A. Their buddy was operating the machine, and he's the one that hit him, or whatever. And it just let them shed off cases so easily. It's
Mhm.
coated in Pam or some grease or something. They're just slippering through them.
Very slippery.
Yeah. So only 1 in 8 workers injured on the job received any compensation, and typically not scaled to help them very much. It is, pennies on the dollar, I'm assuming. But in put that in perspective, in 2019, 93 to 94% of workers' comp claims had initial acceptance, and around 67% of the denied claims were eventually converted and accepted. So we've come a long, long way since then, which is good because it's crazy to me that companies would even like, especially with how dangerous they were back then. It's like, how are
Oh
you
yeah,
not gonna think that you contributed to this at all? But that's
yeah.
the way it is. I imagine most of the business owners back then is like the slimy railroad tycoons that were like kicking people off their farms in the middle of the 1800s. Like just that type of personality.
Yeah, that's probably fairly accurate for most.
Yeah.
I would say the others just didn't know anything different, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
just that's what
That's
the law is.
business
But
went. Yeah.
probably some apathy there, but yeah, I guess I mean modern day workers comp, right? Like it's a no fault system. So those stats are I agree, they're great, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much any illness, pretty much any injury that happens at or because of work is covered.
Yeah.
Do we have time for my favorite claim story?
We can. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh hell yeah. So I insured an all female firm, professional office setting, right? They went, this is in Nebraska,
Okay.
but for their Christmas party, they went over to Council Bluffs, Iowa, so that they could go to the fully
Or
nude strip clubs. Again, all female firm.
yeah. Way off.
I know, yeah. So, so again, they went out of state for a Christmas party at a strip club, and one of the workers was dancing with another patron there when she slipped and fell, smacked her face first, concrete floor,
Yeah.
broke her teeth out.
Oh.
I get a call from the business owner late at night. And I pick up like this is a normal call.
Yeah.
Uh, recall, recounts the story to me. She's like, is this workers' comp? Is this a claim?" And I said, God, I think so,
Yeah. You're
but
there for a work
yeah,
trip.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% covered, and that
That's
worker's got nice new teeth.
awesome. Shiny
Yeah,
teeth in her, you know?
yeah, oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
the American dream.
Yeah. And I like that you kind of tied that in together because it's all female firm. And now we're going to talk about the women of the industry in this story, which is a big part of it because most of the victims were women. And the best part about being a business owner at the turn of the 20th century is that you didn't need to just employ adults. You could also get some children to work for you, which was awesome. You know, they got tiny hands, good for thieving. And um, around 18% of the workforce in 1900 were under the age of 15, which is a little low. I think we could bump those numbers up. And that's around 1.75 million children. And it's not like they're doing the burger flipping or, you know, shining a floor or something. They are working in textile mills, at factories, and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. In the textile mills specifically, half of the workforce was children, which is hilarious to me. Like you'd go to your company meeting and it's just a bunch of kids. Like, yep, hard day out there. Huh? Gotta get back to the wife and kids. Aren't
All
you
of
a
them
kid?
taking a smoke break.
Exactly. Tough day. Boss is really riding me out there. And like they're not putting in weekend hours like we see now where kids are in most places are limited to a certain amount of hours per week they can work. And this is also part of the system, the society at the time, because they were contributing almost a quarter of the total family income on average for, you know, people at that level that under the wealthy basically. And, you know, if they weren't working in a factory in the city, they're probably working on the farm, the family farm. So, you know, is probably higher than the percentage given, honestly. But there's no federal labor laws for child labor until 1916, and then that was struck down 2 years later. Eventually, it would, you know, come back up. But they tried it for 2 years, and they're like, no, we have to have kids. We have to have them working. They yearn for the mines. And then you have immigrants between 1880 and 1930. 27 million immigrants arrived, with 1907 being the big year. Over a million people arrived through Ellis Island alone, which is pretty cool. That place has always fascinated me. I think I had to do a project on it in elementary school, and I was like, this might be the coolest building ever, I think, because I had that, early bonding with it. But and several of our relatives went through there, which is pretty sweet. But anyway, big chunk of immigration related to various famines involving maybe potatoes, and also like various like onslaughts, and not full on genocides, but they were getting there. And one of those things is around 2 million Jewish immigrants entered the United States from 1881 to 1924 because of the pogroms and all of the stuff in the Eastern Europe. The Russians really did not like Jews, and that was pretty evident. And they got out of there, which was smart because it would only get worse. But the thing is 67% of these Jewish immigrants had industrial skills because they were working at these places in their home countries, and it made them super hireable when they came through. Like, you guys have experience, which is good, because you need 10 years of experience for these entry level jobs.
Some things never change.
No, that's not real, I think. I don't know. But the other big population at the time was the Italians. Spaghetti. 2 million of them immigrated in the first decade of the 20th century, and most of them would live on the Lower East Side of New York City. And it was not a luxurious time. It was not what you'd expect, New York City to be. It's a lot of overcrowding, and the tenement housing that was constructed, which is essentially just shanty towns, but built upward instead of outward. Tenements were built on these 25 by 100-foot plots, and they had 4 to 6 floors with 4 separate apartments per floor and around 300 square feet for the whole thing. And you get a kitchen, a bedroom with no windows, and a front room that had windows, but the whole thing didn't have a bathroom. There's a community bathroom outside, which was awesome. It sounds great.
I'm pretty sure New York City still has those.
Yeah, I think they're slightly more spacious, but because it's not like these were well constructed either. But imagine, like if you've ever lived in an apartment, you can imagine how awful this must be, because like apartments nowadays carry noise, but like imagine living in one of these things. It's just constant. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a quote from a architect named Ernest Flagg. He's a very respected architect in New York City, and he said, "The greatest evil which ever befell New York City was the division of blocks into lots of 25 by 100 feet. For from this division has arisen the New York system of tenement houses, the worst curse which ever afflicted any great community." So he's very passionate about it, which I get it. He's an architect. He really likes nice buildings, and these were not. So it makes sense.
Did not mince his words on those. Did he come in and design the next phase? Maybe 11 minutes or 12 minutes?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like you probably stayed away from that kind of thing. Didn't want any part about it. But 2.3 million people live this way, which is 2/3 of the city's population. And they lived in 80,000 plus tenement houses. There's so many of them. The Lower East Side was the most saturated with population. It had 1,100 people per acre on some of these blocks, which, putting that in perspective, during my episode on Jack the Ripper, we learned that the London's East End, which was super overcrowded, very heavy population density, and in the most extreme cases had 2,800 people per 3 square acre area, which is quite smaller. And this was like, oh, it's so packed with people, and this guy's just murdering people, and nobody knows because there's just so much going on. And this is like infinitely worse. He would have had a field day there. Maybe he did, and we don't even know. But yeah, so they, like I said, they didn't have any toilets. They didn't have any light fixtures. There's no ventilation. There was, essentially it was just kind of a room, and that's kind of it. And in these conditions, infant mortality was very high, so high, in fact, that it brought the entire country's infant mortality, like it messed with the ratio, I guess. I was going to say brought it higher, but I don't think that makes sense. So I didn't, but then I did. Anyway.
Well, that makes sense.
Okay. And within this, already dismal situation, women were fighting to be treated fairly in a male-dominated society. And this,
I'm so glad we fixed that in 2026.
I mean, it's way better now, I guess, but
It is better.
it's important context for what's ahead, since women were really just kind of only barely past the breaking into the workplace barrier. If you wanted a job, that was cool, but you're not going to find your career 9 to 5 opportunity, no Dolly Parton moments for you. You are entering these workplaces, and the company owners are seeing this as like, we're just kind of entertaining your fantasy of wanting to buy your own stuff before you get married and, never think about work again because baby. So by the time the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory opened its doors, American industry had perfected a system of exploitation that was almost elegant in its efficiency. It had waves of all of these different immigrants, Eastern European, Italian, these desperate, disoriented, and politically invisible people. A lot of them weren't able to vote or didn't know how. So it's not like they were able to change things as they came in. And then they would get poured into these factories where 14-hour days, piece rate pay, and zero protection legally were pretty much just the terms of their survival. And women kind of bore the sharpest edge of this. They had the most tedious fine motor to work, as endless seaming and button attaching, needle threading, all this little tiny stuff that you didn't quite have machines to do yet, but for some reason women can do this stuff. And they were paid way lower than everybody else. It's great. It's funny because, like, the more I talk about that part in particular, the more references in my brain from like my own work history come into play, where I've worked at places where everything's like lower or shorter, and it's because they were expecting to either be hiring a lot of women or children, who knows. But when I was working at Sherwin-Williams, the guy who was our sales rep for the brand Purdy brushes, he told us that their factories, it's only women that assemble them, which is super interesting. If you ever buy a Purdy paintbrush and look on the back of the handle, there's a little sticker and it's an initial, and it's usually a lady. And not that you'd be able to tell that through the initials, but
Oh, I can recognize the lady's initials.
yeah, but he was like, it's literally like they're the only ones that can do it. Like that, like they've tried implementing men in there, and they just don't last. They don't. It's like some kind of
What?
specifics with their motor control. I don't know. It's very weird, but I don't know. So anyway,
Big meaty claws?
yeah, we have big dumb,
Don't fit into it? What?
and they have little tiny smart hands that just do all the things right, and we're just like clunking through everything and knocking stuff over and making a mess and not cleaning it up. Anyway,
Okay, I'm going to make my own brand, and it's going to be called Ugly Brand
yeah,
brushes, and we'll have just a handprint on the back. That's the dude that made it. It looks like shit, but it pays.
they just like, it looks like Angelica's doll from Rugrats. It's just,
Take that, Purdy.
yeah. Yeah, so many of these women that were working were trying to support their families, and even though they weren't expected to be working career jobs, nobody in power cared, because all of these things were made possible because women couldn't vote and they couldn't put any political influence in how things were handled for them, because you kind of need to be able to vote to decide who is, kind of representing you in that area. So that was tough for them. And then you have politicians who, refuse to regulate the factories because that's their buddy's factory. And there's no consequence for manufacturers or skirted regulations because, they got to make a little bit more money. And yeah, so now we're going to talk about the shirtwaist, which is the fabric outfit thing that they were making at this factory, because in the fold of this confusing and dangerous working environment that we have laid out so far, we entered this unlikely consumer driven product. A lot of people talk about the iPhone as one of America's biggest gifts to the market, or Henry Ford and his assembly line produced Model Ts. But I'm just saying, could be the shirtwaist. It might be pretty cool. I'm a big fan of not having to be pulled around in a rigid wagon pulled by a horse that poops constantly. But I don't know, shirtwaists, they're a little bit different. And
Definitely a little bit different. I had to look it up. I had no idea what we're talking about here.
yeah, I also didn't. And I remember talking about this fire in school. And I remember thinking that shirtwaist was the waist you made while making shirts. Like it wasn't
Makes
it
sense.
wasn't an outfit in my mind, or part of one, I guess. But essentially what the shirtwaist is it's a blouse for the working woman. It was skinnier on the waist, the name, but it also ended at the waist, which is, because it's not a whole dress. And it was,
Sure.
yeah, shirt waist. That's what you get. Couldn't just call it shirt because that
No.
would make too much sense. But yeah, it was the hottest thing in the early 90s fashion. Is the blouse that took America by storm. It had this slim cut on the waist and then flourished out shoulders. And this was the image of the modern woman, which was basically popularized by the Gibson Girl, which is a stylized illustration series that was the image of what it was like to be a woman on the edge of fashion, the cutting edge of fashion in society. And these drawings were published in the hottest magazines of the day, like Life magazine and Harper's Weekly and Collier's. And it portrayed the aesthetic that every woman should be, according to these people paying for these advertisements anyway. The Gibson Girl was not a real person. She was what it felt like to be on the up and up. If you wanted to be a lady who played tennis and rode bikes and swam and did like all sorts of cool stuff, you wanted to be a Gibson Girl. And
She sounds pretty cool.
she's pretty cool. It's essentially like a precursor to Barbie. She does all these things and you want to be her. Yeah. But, and it's also like this representation of, for a lot of these immigrant women who are coming to this country, is like, oh, that's what women in this country are. And so they have this like semi idolized thought process about them. And maybe they are tearing pictures out and hanging them on their tenement walls to decorate this terrible living situation and give them a little bit of aspiration to work for. And this kind of thing is, you would have the magazine and then you'd see the Gibson Girl doing something cool, and then like you turn the page and then it's an advertisement for a store that sells them these shirtwaists, which is kind of like, the fashion trends that exist because they are depicted in reality TV or on TikTok or whatever. Like you see that thing and then you're like, well, I want that thing now. And it's just a very keeping up with the Joneses type thing.
Like the little rubber.
With the Livestrong ones?
No, even before then, right? Like they were just simple round wristbands, rubber
Yeah.
wristbands,
Are they
but
the ones
different colors.
interlock?
Those had a phase as well,
Yeah.
right?
These ones
You just
turn.
gotta have it. It's a
Yeah.
hot day.
It's the hot. And keeping up with the Joneses is a phrase that comes out of a suburb of New York City around this same time, which is kind of interesting to me. And, it's not applicable to the immigrants in the area in the same way, but it is kind of a thing where they're like, well, I'm not trying to keep up with somebody because they have stuff that I want. I'm trying to be like them because they're getting out of this situation. They got a promotion or they, got out of the tenements. Like I want to do that. And how do I do that? Well, it all circles back to everybody wearing a shirtwaist essentially. So it's like this weird version of dressing for the job you want, and it could get you, a promotion, or, maybe spruce up your wardrobe and meet the nice fella down the hallway or something. I don't know. But it was a means to having a nice but affordable outfit like your neighbors, and that's the world that the shirtwaist was born in. And it it was the perfect object for this system because it was affordable and it was manufactured on such a wide range, and that's why it was affordable. It only costs a few dollars because there's these huge factories cranking them out like nobody's business, and anybody from the lady working at the factory could wear one, or the aristocrats, maybe some wealthy lawyer's daughter has one, or somebody, JP Morgan's daughter probably has one. I don't know. But it's kind of pun intended for the word irony, because, irony shirts. Anyway, of women working at a factory that made these garments, and they're like, I gotta have one of these. And it's like, how they're made. Like, are you sure? But it was the hot commodity, which is what it is. But circling back to the low labor costs, and how they were kept so low, New York City was the place to get clothes made back then. In 1910, the city produced 70% of the country's women's clothing. The garment industry was made up almost half of the industrial workforce, and the entire business model was a chain of retailers who then bought from the manufacturers, who contracted subcontractors to pay the workers and have the factories. It wasn't always like that. Some people did a big chunk of that stuff either which way. But yeah, the overall sentiment was make items as cheap as possible, with the most of those costs coming from cutting corners and paying people as least as possible, or the least as possible. Words are hard sometimes,
It's okay. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, enter the antagonists of today's story, Isaac Harris and Max Blanck. They were
Boo.
these guys. They are Russian Jewish immigrants and fled the pogroms in the 1980s. They left in the 1980s and 1890s. And Harris was a tailor. He was a very skilled tailor. He worked in production factories, and worked his way up through the sweatshop system himself, which is how they were able to kind of build their own empire once they moved to America. And Blanck, he was the entrepreneur. He had a lot of natural charisma that lent itself to sales and deal making, like you. Like this guy. This guy's got the riz, the kids say.
Levi's talking about you, our dear listener.
Yes, dear listener. Much, it's they didn't have any formal education, but really good instincts from the school of hard knocks.
Oh yeah.
They met the way that many lifelong friendships begin.
Kindergarten.
No, Blanck had married a Russian immigrant whose cousin just happened to be married to Harris, which is a tale as old as time. It's
classic.
Yeah, if I had a nickel, They founded the Triangle Shirtwaist Company in 1900 with a small shop on Wooster Street. And Harris ran the factory floor and production. Blanck handled the sales and contracts and business relationships. Naturally, they gained an advantage early on, installing new power-driven sewing machines, which were 5 times as fast as the foot pedal models, which is gave them the ability to undercut competition by just sheer speed of turnaround, and also price, because it was cheaper because they could make so many more. They sold their shirtwaists for $3 each. With the math came out to like $110 or something like that in today's money.
That's roughly what it was. Yeah.
So I mean, not as accessible, but I mean, apparently it was.
Well, I think clothing was just more expensive back then because
Yeah,
you don't have the cheap labor and
a shirt
machines
for
now.
$110 if you wanted to. I mean, heck, hoodies are like $60 sometimes. It's like, why, man? It's you just put a hood on it. I know what you're doing.
You're not fooling me.
Yeah. Yeah, they were accessible enough to sell in volume, but then premium enough to mark up at a decent margin. In 1902, they moved into the newly built Ash Building. Newly built, poorly named. It's like omen, a bad omen.
Foreshadowing.
Yep. And originally they took just the ninth floor, but then as their business grew, they took the eighth and then the 10th. And so that was the top three floors that they had. By 1908, annual sales had eclipsed around $1 million, which is around $30 million today. So pretty decent. And that's 8 years. I mean, that's pretty good, man. And that was annual sales. That's, I don't know what their profit was, I guess, but I have to imagine probably pretty decent. So they were manufacturing around 1,000 of these shirtwaists a day, and they quickly became the largest shirtwaist manufacturer in the country, which they were the largest in the city, which meant they were largest in the country because the city had a chokehold on it. And they were dubbed the Shirtwaist Kings by the
Hmm.
press. Yeah. They meant
Well, Levi, your original script on this left out an important detail.
What's that?
Well, they started out as the Square Shirtwaist Company, but they
Yeah.
cut a few corners and ended up as Triangle.
I love it. That's amazing. They also did have the diamond shirt, but yeah, diamond shirtwaist or something like that too.
Cut even more corners.
Yep, they just kept cutting them. You know, if you keep cutting corners on a triangle, you get more corners. A lot of people don't know that, but
Depends on which corners you cut.
well, all of them. You know, and it seemed all like they were on the verge of becoming the next Levi Strauss, which pretty high praise. I mean, the guy's got a cool name at least. Their personal lives began to grow as well. They moved their families out of the cramped tenements and into large brownstones on the Upper West Side. So that's huge. You know, they had servants and chauffeurs and cars, summer houses. Their children attended private school, and they were major figures in their immigrant Jewish community. They donated a lot of money to synagogues, and they were active in social organizations, men of standing, fancy pantses, and they were the epitome of the American dream. If I recorded this 15 times, I'd still pronounce it that way.
That's how it's pronounced.
Yep, it's the only way to do it. So the conditions of this company, they arrived at 7:30 a.m. and then would work until at least 6:30 p.m. and then at least 7 hours on Saturday. And they were paid piece rate, which is you're getting paid per garment you're making. Yeah, peace out, dude. You're getting paid per garment, so not per hour, which incentivized them to go faster and stay longer because, it didn't matter how long they stayed. They were only going to make as much money as the garments they were making, which, as they got faster and faster, the owners would just then slide the scale and be like, okay, well, now you get paid per 10 or whatever, which is super cool.
Paying for the effort, yeah.
Yeah, you guys
If
are.
it's easier for them, it's
I
worth
would like
less,
to
of
pay
course.
you in, what is it that the influencers try to pay people in? Exposure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going to have a different meaning here in a little bit. But women at the Triangle factory might earn $1.50 a week, which is way less than their male counterpart who would earn around $15 to $23 a week. Either way, not great, but hey, couple weeks at the factory and you can buy one of the shirts that you made 14,000 of in the last 2 days. But that really makes me wonder as they're like making these and they're figuring out how much those things cost versus how much they're getting paid. Like, do you think it ever clicked and they're like, you know what, this isn't worth it?
Well, I don't want to jump the gun, but I think there's a reason why.
Yeah. But they would also do this super fun thing where they would designate new workers as learners and then just keep them as such because, well, it was cheaper. They had to pay them more when they were not learners anymore. Even if they could run the factory by themselves, they would leave that label on as long as they could. And then depending on what time of year, demands would force workers to maintain an 80-hour work week with no overtime pay. And then as soon as demand lessened, layoffs commenced. Got to get rid of the fat. Yeah. So
some things never change.
Yeah, this factory in particular had a sign that, that you work on Saturday, but it had a sign on the exit that said, if you don't come in on Sunday, don't come in on Monday, which is just kind of That's the vibe here. And it's, I mean, it wouldn't kill them to have a pizza party. I think that would improve things a lot. Workers were fined for arriving late. They were at fault no matter what caused the delay. They were fined. They were fined for any damaged goods, even if they weren't at fault. If the machine snagged a garment and ruined it, they were fined, even though they're not the ones that you put the machine in. They were also timed on their bathroom breaks and then fined for singing, talking, and unauthorized breaks. Which,
So Amazon, yeah.
yeah, I do support the fines for singing, but I would like it adjusted to be for whistling. I think that would be great because it's always the person who doesn't know how to carry a tune that wants to whistle, and you're like, come on, man, shut up. Workers were expected to supply their own needles and thread, and then in some cases, they were paying rent on the sewing machines that they had to use to do their job. So even if the employer, had paid for them already, and then the previous person who worked in that spot probably paid for it again in rent, they just kept paying for it.
It's a good business model.
Yeah. Well,
Can't argue with that.
It's really great because no matter what, it didn't matter. Like if you upset somebody and they left, well, there's just another worker that is going to come in because there's so many immigrants and so many people who needed jobs at this point. So, somebody's always looking for something. And you leave. Also, if you leave, we're going to blacklist you. So you can't get a job here or ever. So the demographic for this job in this job specifically is heavy on the female side. It was 80% women, 70% of them were aged 16 to 25, and then 65% of them being Eastern European Jewish, because again, that's a huge influx of them immigrating over. And employers really liked working with Eastern European younger Jewish women because it was in their minds least likely that they would organize and start unions, which is certainly a thought, which also later on that we'll talk about one of the prominent labor union leaders, and she's a small Jewish woman, which is kind of ironic. But workers who couldn't read or write English, they were preferred. They had no clue if they were being taken advantage of when it came to deductions, contracts, complaints, anything like that. So employers were like, we'll find something for you to do that you don't need to talk or read. It's fine. We'll draw pictures on there for you.
That is the ideal employee.
Yeah. The Italian community was coming in with their mafia roots. They were doing this middleman thing where they would control the wages and job placements and food supplies and then charge their fellow immigrants for everything at every stop of that. They were also used as strike breakers, and the owners would kind of use this as a way to pit all of the different immigrant communities against one another so they wouldn't, have any solidarity and organize. But yeah. Oh, this is where I put the blacklist thing. So yeah, if you filed a complaint or quit or anything like that, you were blacklisted and they spread your name all around town and you couldn't get a job. So that was great. So you kind of just had to do the thing. Now, this is my favorite part of this script because we're getting to the building itself, which we have our little mini game for you at the end. Because, it's such a luxurious building. It was pretty new at the time. A lot of really cool commodities going. For instance, they had 10,000 square feet to work with, which was pretty cool. There's 240 workers, which rounded out to about 42 square feet per. And then you have sewing machines and racking and factory equipment that adds to that as well. They had baskets made from wicker all around the edges to throw scraps in and also to grab material from. That's just fine. Pretty cool. The sewing machines were wall to wall. They were all over the place and they needed regular oil to maintain them. So there was oil on the floors and then oil drums. There was cotton scraps strewn about. There was big bins that held these cotton scraps that were accumulated for months at a time because it, probably took a worker away from their job to go empty them. So they probably made them big on purpose. So they would have to dump it less often if I'm, just getting in the head of these guys as well. And then also no sprinkler system. It was going to cost around $5,000 at the time to get one put in, and the guy who built the building didn't want to pay for that, even though the building cost $400,000. He didn't want to include that, and then the business owners didn't opt to pay to get it put in when they, decided to start doing factory stuff in there. And then there's no fire alarm, basically just a guy that goes, "Oh, there's fire." And then they didn't have regular fire drills. And then they had a standpipe hose system, which was apparently state of the art when it was put in. And we'll come back to, there was a fire escape, which went down to the second floor skylight. I don't know. Maybe I don't understand what fire escapes are for, but I feel like they should go all the way down. That could just be me. Maybe I don't understand buildings very well.
The Ash building is only allowed to have fires above the second floor.
Okay. Yeah. So once you get to second floor, you're good.
Yeah, it's all done. Yep.
Also, part of the fun, the abundance of tuberculosis among the workers, it actually carried the nickname of the tailor's disease because it was the most common cause of death among garment workers, which is super crazy. It spread quickly due to the closed environment, the lint-filled air, no real good ventilation system or at all. They would just kind of open a door and or a window, didn't open doors. That'd be crazy. All right, so here's where you come in. You got your insurance hat on based on these materials. How would you feel if this business was like, "Hey, we need insurance, Colton. Can you help us?"
Yeah. Between the flammable materials and the more flammable materials and the wall-to-wall machinery and the lack of ventilation and the lack of sprinklers and the incomplete fire escape, it's great. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
the ideal client.
Yeah,
all around.
just a sound investment in general.
Well, you said yourself the building's fireproof, so
Yeah, pay no attention to the name of the Ash building. It's named for Guy, not ominously, we promise. And I mentioned, the doors not being closed because they didn't like to let people out, especially in this place, this factory in particular. They locked the doors because they didn't like people stealing. And I get it. That's fair. But I don't know.
it's $100 a shirtwaist.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a lot of dollars.
Yeah. It's just these people just walk around all willy-nilly doing what they want, grabbing shirts, putting them in their basket or whatever. And they would at quitting time, they would inspect the bags that they brought in to make sure they weren't stealing anything. So, yeah, it's a lot of theft prevention. Also, it was a way to kind of keep the union people out at the same time. So it kind of worked twofold. In some sources, they talk about it's a way to keep the unions out. And then other sources, it's like, well, they didn't want people stealing. So I assume it's both of them. And each source is trying to tell a different story slightly. But either way, not great. You're locked in there. And, if you can read the title of this episode, you probably know that that's probably not great. But
yeah, I don't know. Two birds, one door.
Yeah.
As they say.
The guy, the Harris, the tailor, the guy had worked at several factories before he even made it to America. This was kind of like my thought is that he had experience in this. He had seen people stealing at the factories he had worked, so he was paranoid that it was going to happen. And it was his thing. Lock the doors, and we had to check their bags on the way out. The production floor was arranged so that foremen could walk around, if they were on risers almost, as people were working.
Oh, not enough room for 5 men though, huh?
Yeah, only 4 men. And they, the rubber-soled shoes were starting to become a little more popular, and these guys would wear them to make sure they could sneak up on people, make sure they weren't taking any unlicensed breaks, man. You can't be just standing there. You got to be doing something while you're standing there. You got time to lean. You got time to make some shirts. Okay. So that's the exciting vibe in the factory. And it was, this factory was like a lot of them. So just extrapolate that into all of the different places in New York City at the time. Now, in 1909, there was an International Ladies Garment Workers Union, aka we need a shorter name, organization, who had a 13-week strike in New York City, which had an estimated 20,000 workers. And just by pure coincidence, it was sparked by a walkout of workers at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. So that's weird.
Nice.
It's crazy because you would think that that place is awesome. I don't know. Women just complaining about stuff all the time. JK, obviously, around 20% of the workforce walked out, and then the news spread around the city. You know, the garment community, very tight knit.
Got him. Nice.
Yeah. For those of
I almost didn't follow that thread.
Colton loves puns, and like just so when I get one, I feel pretty good because he's usually pretty quick. But yeah, even some local debutantes in the area were supporting the striking women with the last names like Vanderbilt and Morgan and others were offering their money to aid, and then also would just march with them and kind of like stand between the actual workers and like the police to give them some sort of protection, because the police aren't going to beat up JP Morgan's daughter. Feels like a bad career move on their part, but yeah. And then these the strikers, they would be attacked by strike breakers or arrested. You know, this is not fun, but this strike itself was kind of successful for a big chunk of the garment community because a lot of them were given some, like they conceded some things. There wasn't a full unionization, but you know, they were like, hey, we're going to help out a little bit. The Triangle Shirtwaist Company was one, if not one of the few who refused. Not only did they not sign, they hired detectives, which would then identify workers who were striking and A, fire them, B, hire thugs to attack them, and then C, pay prostitutes to like create a scene that would give the police context to arrest the workers. And then they would, you know, bribe the police to look the other way or to pick these women up. And then they would create a fake union at the end of it with Harris and Blanck's relatives playing the union reps and be like, no, we're good. Things are great over here. Just call them. And then they'd call and they'd be like, yeah, nope. Yep, everything's good. Yep, see, pretty cool.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. It's almost
horrible.
Too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were also directly opposed to the one demand that the workers were really upset about, which is unlocking the exit doors, which is, you know,
what a ridiculous
broken record. Get something else to complain about for once. Jeez, it's always locked door. It's not safe. Yeah, so here we go with the we get some fires going, not fire, but fires, because we get a couple fires before the fire, a little pre-fire fire. And these men, Blanck and Harris, had several fires at their businesses before the big one. They had 2 fires at Triangle itself, both in the year 1902, which was the first year they moved into the Ash building. And then they also had 2 fires in their diamond waste company, one in 1907 and another in 1910, and then all of them outside of business hours. So I ask you, do you find that suspicious at all?
It's not great. That's for sure. I mean, frankly, I don't find it suspicious.
So
with those,
how terrible.
I mean, it has everything you need. To start a fire. Like any small thing going wrong.
Smokey the Bear would be so disappointed.
Oh yeah, so disappointed.
Listen, only you guys can prevent this, and you're not preventing it. Not even a little bit.
Only you can prevent factory fires. That's right. How we got to start. And then he got blacklisted and sent to the forest.
You're out of the factory. You're in the forest now, man. Yeah. And so the last time we talked about this, I mentioned the Insurance Monitor, which is a trade journal. It's like a magazine dedicated to fire insurance, which is awesome. That they had like I bet it was some very cool reading.
Hey, we still have trade journals, and they're very excited.
I bet they are. And in this trade journal, in this insurance monitor, they made a specific note in the years before the fire that insurance on shirtwaist stock was fairly saturated with moral hazard. And you know kind of what this means, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, in speaking conceptually on insurance, there's moral hazard and there's morale hazard, right? So, if it was moral hazard, other that's a pretty damning statement from the journal.
Yeah.
They're saying that the textile mills are run by a bunch of thieves that
Yeah.
will set fires to collect on the insurance.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that would hinder these guys in obtaining and keeping insurance, but it didn't. It they
I would have thought so, yeah.
they continued to have insurance at the exact same rate the entire time. And
Absolutely insane.
their position, their job, if not them specifically, were being like called out in this trade journal. So
Yeah.
wild that everybody was like, it's fine. Yeah. So there's even some speculation that their refusal to install sprinklers was because they needed to be able to burn their businesses again, should they, need some extra scratch. But
Again, some things never change.
yeah. What do you know about sprinkler systems? Anything?
I know a few things now. Yeah. More than I really wanted to know about sprinkler systems.
He's so good at taking pictures of them in places that they exist. I mean, it might be hard
Um,
for you to see them when you go to businesses, but you bring Colton, he's going to find them.
there's some people that cannot identify. I think they physically just cannot see fire sprinkler systems. I think
Maybe,
it's like
yeah. Well, I
it's
mean,
the wrong curvature of the eyeball. I think.
oh, they got like the fish eye or whatever it's called, walleye. I don't know. There's an
Some
actual,
fishy for sure.
yeah. All right. So now we're coming to the fire. Are you ready?
So ready.
Oh, all right. A little too excited for it. Um, It's a spring Saturday in New York City. It is pleasant enough for people to be out and about, walking around in the streets. It is actually March 25th, 1911, which is, we're here on March 22nd, so that's kind of fun. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory is their payday. They working. It's Saturday, they got to work Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
Also, we'll see you tomorrow. And they are there for their 7-hour shift. They come in at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and they're actually kind of ending their day. It takes time to kind of wind the day down, which is 4:45. You got to shut all the machines down and not clean anything up, just in case they want to set a fire in the off hours. And again, probably going to work the next day too. Well, they won't, but they could. And
They didn't know.
irony, cruel irony in the situation is that, they were literally ending the day. And also the other part of that is that, in that strike that I talked about a little bit ago, one of the concessions that most of the other garment companies made is that you guys are only going to work 5 days a week now. Not the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. We work all of the days, all of the time, because we got to make them. Now,
They're
as
not
I
going to make themselves.
yeah, that's right. Believe me, if we could get them to, we would. But these guys would have been so fast to get AI in their factories.
Oh, they'd love it. They would love it.
We don't have to pay anybody. This is great. So, as I mentioned before, the company occupied the top 3 floors of the Ash building. There was around 180, mostly men, on the 8th floor who were the cutters. They would cut all the material before it would go upstairs and get sewed up. And on the 9th floor, which is where all the sewing happened, there's around 260 mostly young immigrant women who worked at the sewing machines. And then on the 10th floor, you had 70 office workers, which were bookkeepers, and then also like pressers who would like iron stuff. And then the big cheeses, Harris and Blanck, on the 10th floor, top big kick of the castle, top of the chair. And like I said, they were getting ready to leave for the day, and the 8th floor was actually already starting to line up to get their bags checked, just in case they're trying to steal stuff, because we know they want to. and nobody knows exactly what happened, but at approximately 4:40 p.m., which is 5 minutes before they were going to quit, a scrap bin beneath one of the cutting tables on the 8th floor began to smolder, and quite possibly due to a match or cigarette, even though smoking banned in the office, banned at the workplace, it was widely ignored, which is fair
Right.
because like it's going to cut your appetite down and it's going to keep you working. Smoke them up, dude. And we're insured. Who cares?
I was about to say a very progressive policy for them to have, but even better that they have the policy and nobody follows it.
Which right there, you
It's
would
so
think
perfect.
if they could prove, and maybe that's why they never came out and proved that it was a cigarette, because if they did, would that void their insurance if they have a no smoking policy and somebody was smoking?
Sure doesn't seem like it back then.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You could have a literal photo of the guy pouring gasoline in the floor, and apparently you'd still get your money. It's so crazy.
It's insane. Absolutely
Yeah,
insane.
but as we've kind of mentioned, this setup was really, really perfect for fire. It like
Just
you
asking
couldn't
for it.
build a better fire setup than this. It's so perfect. There's cloth everywhere, tissue paper hanging out from like clotheslines, which held like the patterns for the ladies to sew, and there again, there was the baskets on the side around the built around the perimeter of the sewing floor, and then you have full barrels of machine oil, which is good, and then no sprinkler system. And if you get your fire pyramid out from page 10 in your Boy Scout manual, you'll find that you need oxygen, which is, good. And then your fuel, which is all of the fabric and oil, and then heat, which is your match and cigarette, whatever it was. And then boom, boom goes the dynamite. And pretty much instantly, this fire spreads out because obviously there's so many flammable materials everywhere. And also, oil barrels were on the 8th floor. So this fire starts on the 8th floor. And then, as soon as it spreads everywhere, which was basically instantly, it gets to the oil barrels. And that really accelerates things, pun intended. And accelerant. It barely works, but it works. And
I got him.
yeah. And it is wooden floors all around, which is another great design of this system. You got fire burning up into wood floors, which are soaked in oil and then have fabric above them. So basically, as soon as the 8th floor went up, the 9th floor went up as well. And the reaction was, I mean, it was quick. They definitely were like, yeah, they have fire pails on the wall, which are just buckets pre-filled with water. Not going to cut it here. It is a little too much fire for some buckets of water because there's no
Did,
slowing this thing down.
did they stop, drop, and roll?
You know what? I don't think they did. That's why we do
Should
it.
have tried.
That's why we do it, folks. A worker ran to alert the floor supervisor, and then another one grabbed the standpipe hose from the wall and turned the valve, and then nothing happened, which is cool. This state of the art hose that was super cool in this thing, and they're like, this is awesome. It had never been used, and it had never been maintained, so it was completely rusted shut. It was
That's what you want.
yeah. Why would you need a hose for stuff? Yeah, seems kind of dumb. We make shirts, not hose.
I see what you did there.
A bookkeeper rang the 10th floor to alert the owners because got to tell them you got to make sure they're okay. And then they tried to call the 9th, but they didn't have a connection to the 9th floor. People on the 9th floor had no idea the fire had even started until it was basically swallowing their floor right away. So yeah, we got a couple levels of failure going on here. Hose system rusted shut, corroded. Nobody had ever tested it. No sprinklers, obviously. The alarm system non-existent, and nobody knew really what to do because they had never had a drill or anything. So, which is go ahead.
For our faithful listeners out there, a standpipe, probably back in the day, would have been a reservoir of water connected to a pipe system that is just hanging out there,
Yeah,
standing there, if you will. You have to manually go and tap it. to get water out of it, as opposed to a fire sprinkler system that would just
Go.
go off, right? But doesn't do much good if you've never checked it and there's not water in there and it's rusted shut.
Yeah. I mean, some would say that's probably the best way for it to operate, I would think.
Some might say that.
Yeah. These guys, the guys that own this company would say that because that's
what a great excuse to let it all burn.
Yeah. I'm sure nowadays there's probably some rules in place where you kind of have to have like regular checks on some of these things, like fire prevention systems and things like that.
Yeah, there's international and state and municipal building codes. So pretty much anything over 3 stories has to be sprinklered. That's like a rule of thumb here.
Yeah.
And if you have a sprinkler system, it has to be serviced annually by, a fire technician
Yeah.
service, right? And if you don't have to have sprinklers, you're supposed to have an annual testing and recertification of all your fire extinguisher units, right? So like there's all sorts of checks now.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit too much in certain ways,
Yeah.
but when you're dealing with people's lives, a little bit too much is probably better than not enough.
Yeah. Clearly. Yeah.
I don't know. We're about to find out.
Yeah. I definitely think that I've seen the guy inspecting the fire extinguishers every so often. Like I've seen that and I've been a part of that in some jobs that I've had, but I never really thought about that from the sprinkler system angle because like that's so far out of my jurisdiction in terms of like the jobs I've had, and I don't deal with that part. But like it does make sense. Like obviously you gotta have somebody come and check it. Yeah. So as the word spread and people began to panic, they were not calm and cool and collected as we are trained to do in our fire drills. They were freaking out, which makes sense because it was a lot of fire really fast. So I kind of don't fault them there. And there were a couple ways, specifically to get out of this building. The first was the Green Street stairway, which the 8th floor workers primarily used. It was the fastest escape and the primary one. And only the quickest of the 9th floor workers were able to use it because soon, very quick, about 3 minutes, it was impassable because all of the smoke from the 8th floor began to flood it upward. And you could, I guess, try and get down, but it would disorient them and it would be basically impassable just because it would be hard to breathe and they'd probably pass out. But around 100 people from the 9th floor did make it out this way, which is good. And then the 10th floor people used this stairway too, but they went up instead of down and get to the roof and then try and get to a adjacent building or something. And then you have the Washington Place door and stairway. And this one is the most agitating of this whole ordeal because this is the locked door for the 9th floor. And, you'd think one of the first things you do when there's a fire is try and open as many doors to get people out as you could. But the key holder for this floor had already fled out of the other doorway that was now closed. So the other part of this is that this door opened inward towards the factory floor. So as people panicked and rushed towards it, they put pressure on it and prevented it from being able to pull open if they would have been able to work together and kind of just sheer willpower get a line of people pulling this thing. They might have been able to at least pry it open or something, but they were pushing on it, and ultimately there was around 50 bodies that would be piled up against this door in the aftermath. And you have the elevators, which is the third form of exit. And this is my silver lining for this story because we have 2 guys running the elevators, Joseph Zito and Gaspar Martirio. I don't know. Anyway, these guys made repeated trips up into the smoke and heat to get as many people out as they could. They were packing 30 to 40 people into these elevator cars that were designed for 10 to 12 people. But eventually people began to panic and pry open the doors into the elevator shafts and then scale down the cables or just jumping down. And the operator, Joseph Zito, said he heard, quote, the rattle of the silver from pay envelopes falling through the grating in the cars. So that's depressing. And that probably would stick with you for a long time. Poor Joseph here only lived to be about 48. So he died from, a lot of health complications later on, and also penniless. So that's great. These two guys saved around 150 people, and this guy died without anything. So, yeah. And he got some form of cancer or something from these fires, I would imagine. But yeah. But they saved 150 people, which is, half of the survivors, which is pretty awesome. And then lastly, we have the fire escape, door number 4. This is one of the things that workers used right away, but it was 18 inches wide, which is meant for, single file calm escapes. Granted, back then people were a lot skinnier than we are now, but 18 inches sounds like way too much, some would say, but it's not that much.
Pretty large.
Yeah.
Think about it.
It had this super cool feature where the doors that opened to the fire escape would actually open and block people from being able to go past them. So they would have to open the door, get people out, and then back people up and close the door and then go forward again, which was really
that is the best design for a fire escape. Yeah.
When you're trying to get the heck out of there, it's super convenient. And then
that's how they still design them. Actually,
so we don't want. Yeah, go slow. Okay, you gotta back up a little bit. And then again, this thing only went to the second floor skylight, and also it collapsed under the combined weight of all of the people, and then heat, which 20 people were on it at the time, and they fell 100 feet down to the courtyard and all died, which is terrible. Especially the amount of I'm gonna get out, and then the door doesn't open, or I'm gonna get out, it's a fire escape, and then it starts to creak and fall, and you're like, that's gotta be terrifying. Now, at this point, we have some eyewitness statements from one William Shepard. He's a journalist who just happened to be walking through the area at the time. Or was he? His conspiracy, he did it. No. But he's got a very vivid way with words, and he ended up being a novelist eventually. Either he was at the time or would be after this, I don't know. But we'll see what I mean. He's got a really colorful description. So he was walking through and then saw the plume of smoke out of the building, and then he was in his Washington Square Park, and he goes over and he describes the following: I saw every feature of the tragedy visible from the outside the building, and I learned a new sound, a more horrible sound than description can picture. It was the thud of a speeding living body on a stone sidewalk. Thud, dead, thud, dead, thud, dead, thud, dead. 62 thud deads. I called them that because that's the sound, and the thought of death came to me each time. At the same instant, there was plenty of chance to watch them as they came down. The height was 80 feet. The first 10 thud deads shocked me. I looked up and saw that there were scores of girls at the windows. The flames from the floor below were beating in their faces. And somehow I knew that they, too, must come down. And something within me, something that I didn't know was there, steeled me. I watched one girl falling, waving her arms, trying to keep her body upright until the very instant she struck the sidewalk. She was trying to balance herself, and then came the thud, and a silent, unmoving pile of clothing, twisted, broken limbs. Yikes. And this stuck with this guy too. He remembered this for a long time, I bet. This second little description he got, it's still pretty dark, but it's got a little sweet human moment in it. He says, I looked up and saw a love affair in the midst of all the horror. A young man helped a girl to the windowsill, and then he held her out and deliberately away from the building and let her drop. He seemed cool, calculating. He held out a second girl, did the same way to her, let her drop. And then he held out a third girl who did not resist, and I noticed that. They were unresisting, as if he were helping them onto a streetcar instead of into eternity. Undoubtedly, he saw that a terrible death awaited them in the flames, and this was only a terrible chivalry. Then came love amid the flames. He brought another girl to the window, and those of us who were looking saw her put her arms around him and kiss him. And then he held her out into space and dropped her. But quick as a flash, he was on the windowsill himself. His coat fluttered upward, air filled his trouser legs, and I could see that he wore tan shoes and hose. His hat remained on his head, thud dead. Together they went into eternity. I saw his face before they covered it, and you could see in it that he was a real man. He had done his best. So, kind of a sweet moment, all things considered, I guess. And it, you know, you got to think about the people that are in this building at the time. You know, they are seeing this massive, huge amount of fire and watching people get burnt alive or passing out from smoke. And it's like, what else are we going to do? And, you know, we saw a very similar sight during 9/11. I mean, these people were like, I can't get out. And how many people, and honestly, there's a documentary that I watched not that long ago about the fire crews, like the first ones on the scene, and they had a film crew with them, just happenstance. Where was it? And you start to hear the bodies fall, and like it is crazy because it just sounds like gunshots almost, because they were obviously falling from a much higher distance than this building, but still, like, you know, and he describes the screams of the women punching out through the sound of the roar of the fire. And then he said it was 10 or more impacts before he became just numb to the feeling, and then counted around 62. And then he describes that the fire teams arrived and were using the hoses, even though the water wouldn't even reach where the fire was at, and all the water filling up the gutters, which was just saturated with red. And the tallest ladder that they had was only reached the 6th floor, which is 3 floors shy. And some people even tried to jump down onto the ladder, which is a huge distance, but I mean, better than falling all the way down, I guess. And then you think, oh, if we get these high rises in the city, they got to have those nets for people to jump out. And they did, but people would jump and then they just fell straight through. So not ideal either. But he talks about having seen some of these women marching the year prior in the strike, and that they were striking for sanitary and safe conditions in these shops. And he says at the end of that, he says these dead bodies were the answer to what they were asking for, which is pretty dark. In a stark different scene to the hellscape down below, the rooftop escapees managed to cross a gap between the ash building and the adjacent building thanks to an NYU law professor named Frank Summer and his students, who grabbed 2 painter's ladders. Excuse me. And all but one person on the 10th floor survived. And the last person was a lady whose hair and dress were on fire when the students found her, which has got to be a crazy sight as well. These students that helped them were Charles Kremer, Elias Cantor, George DeWitt, and Frederick Newman. And Frederick Newman, of course, being the grandfather of Gary Newman, who wrote one of, if not the best song ever, Cars.
Best song ever.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. They're not related. Pretty sure Gary Newman's British, but these, you know, got to add some levity to this situation. And the Legal Eagles did save the day, though. They had around 150 people that they helped through the roof, which is awesome. All told, 146 victims died. 141, I think, was day of, and then the remaining 5 died over the next few days. Of the 146, 123 of them were women, and the youngest were Kate Leon and Sarah Maltese, and they were both 14. And then the oldest was Providenza Pano, who was 43. Yeah, I still like that name, the Providenza. That's such a cool name, and you don't see it around anymore, which is unfortunate. It's old-timey Italian names. Around 58 to 62 of them jumped from the windows, and some of them fell also. just trying to like get some air or whatever, which, corroborates Shepard's testimony. 50 or more died at the locked door, which I talked about, and then 35 in the elevator shafts, and then 20 when the fire escape collapsed. 56 of these bodies were burnt beyond recognition and only identified by jewelry, gold cap teeth, shoe heels, or socks. And then at least one entire family was killed, a mother and two daughters. And then the daughters were found at the bottom of the elevator shaft, who they were holding on to each other, which is also kind of sweet, but super depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dead were taken to a nearby Charities Pier, which was nicknamed Misery Lane, and placed in super quickly made wooden coffins. And they ran out of materials to make the coffins, so they had to like quickly import them from another place nearby. And the whole situation of them like identifying the bodies, they had to have hundreds of or 800 police officers kind of keep guards so people didn't like bum rush the area, because everybody's like panicking, all of the people that were involved, so they had to have guards, and then groups of 15 were allowed in to go and try and investigate and find their loved ones, or try and figure out if their loved ones were even there. 4 days of that took a while, and then all but 6 were identified, and then 100 years later the 6 were identified via like extended family genealogical investigation, which is,
That's wild.
yeah, like somebody's cousin had to like sign up for, ancestry.com or something for these people to get tracked down, which is such a crazy thing. Like that's the only way they were able to figure it out. But the response was pretty quick for the fire engine's sake. It was about a minute and a half before they got there. But again, the water didn't reach all the way. The ladders only reached the 6th floor. The water towers reached the 7th. And basically all they could do was wait. All of the sources talk about how the fire was under control in 30 minutes and completely extinguished in 45. But all that really means is that all of the things that were able to burn burnt in 45 minutes. Like that, especially with it, going upward. And anyway,
They kept the other buildings from catching on fire.
Yeah, prevented the
It's
spread.
really all.
So 18 minutes basically before the entire like full damage goes through, which is, again, we have the cascade of preventable things that probably could have helped. I don't know if it would have solved everything, but it could have helped a little bit. All of this perfect storm of things leading up to this.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that proximate cause, right? The chain of events that lead up to the loss. Any one item you can break out there that could have stopped it.
Yeah.
There's too many things that happened here.
Yeah, so many contributing factors. I kind of drew the comparison to like a Final Destination movie. Like those movies do a very good job of like showing you a chain of events of things that lead to something, and it's like over the top, but like this was also over the top. It was a series of very preventable things that happened that led to this, and you can see every step of it being like, if you wouldn't have done that, we probably would have been okay here. But
I would say that this is the exact opposite of the Final Destination.
Oh, because those are freak accidents, and this was like, obviously this is going to happen.
Yeah. It's like somebody just happened to leave that nail over here that falls off when somebody bumps over there, and like you just like get this weird
Rube Goldberg machine.
Yes, thank you. Rube Goldberg machine that ends up with somebody's death. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. I mean, it was designed to go up in flames.
Yeah. That's what, like I said earlier, like you couldn't design a more flammable situation than this. It has literally all of the things that you would need to make a fire without. And like I mentioned, it being a cigarette or a match, but also there is an opportunity for it to be a mechanical spark that does this too, because that could happen. I mean, or even electrical, like a little electrical spark. I don't know. So the public response is pretty bad. People are not happy about this, especially with the massive strikes the year prior. The New York Times front page reads 141 men and girls die in the waste factory fire, which barely any men died in that. I mean, some did for sure, but pour one out for the homies. But there was mostly women that died. Why they have to be second in that, I don't get. It's so weird. Even for back then, I feel like you would want to emphasize a bunch of women and children died in this thing. Like that's bad. Yeah,
You would think.
yeah.
I don't know.
But you know, aside from the headline, they were pretty sympathetic in their coverage. They ran full detailed victim profiles with the ones they could find information about, and they had pictures of the victims that when they could find them, and they had survivor accounts, which kind of grounded the whole thing to everybody being able to relate to it in some way. It's like, oh, it's not just a name in a paper now. Like that's a whole life. It's that I don't know what it's called, but there's a term for the sudden realization that everybody has a full life.
Oh yeah, I think it's a German word.
Yeah, probably. And that's, how a lot of the public began to perceive this. Like,
These are real
yeah,
people. Oh, weird.
what? That's crazy. But yeah, the district attorney, Charles Whitman, he came to the scene and in the evening on the same day and proclaimed it was not only a fire investigation, but also of, quote, the whole condition which makes it possible for a fire trap of such kind to exist. This guy did his homework. He knows exactly what's going on. Fire
Probably
chief.
a Boy Scout.
Oh, probably. Yeah. He's got the pyramid. Fire Chief Edward Croker noted
You
that.
mean a triangle?
Oh my God, it's all connected. If this happened in Bermuda, we'd really be perfect. But the fire chief noted that the Manufacturers Association had met the week prior to oppose his proposals for more fire escapes and sprinklers in their buildings. That's crazy. You're going to make us pay money for stuff? That's rude. The mayor made a astute observation that the deaths were really the result of panic rather than negligence, which most of the city was not pumped by, and he had to go and retract his he couldn't retract it because it was printed out there, but he published an amendum, So on April 5th, they had a memorial march where there was about 400,000 people lining the route of this march, which contained around 80 to 120,000 people in marching, which is just goes to show you how mad people were. And then in the days leading up to this, there was a meeting at the Metropolitan Opera House, which was organized by the Women's Trade Union League and then also Anne Morgan, who was J.P. Morgan's daughter. And it was a little hectic. All of the working class people in attendance just started screaming at all of the wealthy reformer people who were trying to help, but it's your friends that did this, kind of thing. They didn't have any patience for expressions of sympathy from people who represented or were friends with the same people who had let this happen. So, and then there was a speech by a prominent union activist. This is the lady I mentioned earlier, Rose Schneiderman. And she has this really long speech at the end, but she had to wait several minutes. Her speech was announced that she was going to do it. She goes to this podium and waits and doesn't say anything for several minutes before people get the hint and start to quiet down. The teacher just standing there at the front of the room staring at everybody until people are okay, yeah. But essentially her speech is on, there's no good fellowship to come out of this. We tragedy. People want it to be oh, well, this is where we got to be good to one another. Is this is a direct cause of people not caring about each other. And I'm not going to care about them if they're not going to care about me, kind of thing. And basically that they need to have some sort of legal protection from things like this, and they got to stand up for themselves. So this lady would ultimately become friends with Mr. and Mrs. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. She would also be the only labor leader at the New Deal labor policy negotiations, which is Pretty impressive. Yeah. But we did get a trial. These guys did get brought to trial. The fire marshal's investigation concluded within 10 days that a fire originated from a scrap bin under cutting table number 2 on the 8th floor. It's very specific. The DA ran a parallel criminal investigation, interviewing survivors at the scene, at the hospital, photographing everything in the building. And then they were able to recover the lock from the door on the 9th floor, and then documented the rotted hose and the rusted pipe and like all of the things going on with that. And then grand jury proceedings went through April with 103 witnesses going through that. And then on April 11th, Harris and Blanck were indicted on 7 counts of manslaughter in the first and second degrees. And the grounds were locking a factory door, which was a misdemeanor under Labor Code Section 80, and a misdemeanor that caused a felony constituted in felony manslaughter. So, ipso facto, there you go. They posted.
Are you the lawyer now? Man, look at you go. Look at that Latin.
Yeah. So they posted their $25,000 bail pretty quickly because, they have a lot of money. And then no charges were brought to the owner of the building, the guy who paid for it, Joseph Ash. He was, technically code compliant, even though, the codes were not great. So he's like, I didn't do anything wrong. It's your fault. You have the bad codes, not me, man. So
yeah, you can't ask him for more than that.
Here he goes. Okay. No inspectors were charged either, which is kind of surprising to me because there were several documented warnings leading up to this, which I guess, I don't know, maybe they don't need to be charged. It's whoever they report to that should be, I guess. But yeah. Anyway, trial began December 4th, 1911, and the judge assigned, which is a bad draw for these guys, or for the victims. Good draw for the company guys, because this is Thomas C.T. Crane, and he had previously served as the tenement house commissioner, and he was blamed for a deadly tenement fire during his tenure. Not going to be biased at all, I don't think.
Don't think so.
Yeah.
Don't think so. Perfect guy for the job.
I can get you guys out of it. Just stick with me. For the defense, Harris and Blanck retained Max D. Stewart, who was one of the most celebrated attorneys in New York City, and he had deep connections to Tammany Hall, which is where all the change makers and reputable businessmen hung out and rubbed elbows with the lawmakers and things. So, yeah, no biases there either. But he made his reputation defending the rich and powerful against labor charges. So a little bit of unholy trinity stuff going on there. And there was over 150 witnesses who testified over 3 weeks, with more than a dozen testifying that they had tried the 9th floor door and could not open it. And Harris took the stand first, and his lawyer kind of played up the rags to riches story, was like, this is simply a hardworking immigrant who made some money, never tried to harm anybody, donates to his local community. He's a good guy. He did testify about his obsession over the potential losses from theft, but insists that the door was not locked. He also testified that in all of the time that they had been in business, all these 11 years, they'd lost maybe $25 worth of material in total. So can you really blame the guy? So the key testimony came from a survivor, Kate Alterman, and she watched one of her coworkers burned to death at the locked door, Margaret Schwartz, and her testimony was super intense, and she described in detail the burning dress and the hair and screams and all of the things. And the defense attorney, Stewart, just asked her to repeat it, and she did. And then he asked her 5 more times, or 5 times total, and she repeated it the exact same every single time. And because of that, he didn't call her a liar, but he didn't call her a truther either. And he let the jury kind of figure out, oh, she's been coached because she just keeps saying the same thing perfectly every single time. But in reality, she was an immigrant who was still learning English, and she tried very, very hard to practice what she was going to say because she didn't want to make a mistake on the stand. And because of that, she actually hurt herself in that same way, because the jury, who is 12 dudes who have no concept of how hard it is for this lady to be there and then recounting what she's recounting, and then also not be speaking English, her first language, they're not going to pick up on that. They're going to go, oh, well, she's just saying the same thing over and over and over because somebody told her to. Just pretty rude, but kind of a sign of the time, I suppose.
It is.
Yeah.
Solid lawyering.
Yeah. I mean, that it's a smart move. And you know what? Sometimes the smartest lawyer moves are kind of the slimiest ones too.
Absolutely.
Fine line. But yeah, so they had analyzed the lock and knew that it was locked at the time of the fire, which is pretty huge. The only problem is that the judge gave the jury a very, very narrow framework in which to find their judgment. He said that they had to find that Harris and Blanck personally knew that that specific door was locked during the fire. Not that it was routinely locked. Not that it was company policy, not that they specifically knew it was locked that day, just during the fire. And it took them an hour and 45 minutes to deliberate. And the first ballot was 8-2 with 2 abstaining. And then 6-6. Oh, they were for acquittal. And then 6-6 even split. And then third unanimous for acquittal. And the judge stated, quote, I believe that the door was locked at the time of the fire, but we could not find them guilty unless we believed they knew the door was locked. Okay, then. I like that. Even if it was company policy, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Now, Harris and Blanck had to be escorted through a side door, and when they hit the street, they were swarmed by a mob of angry people. A victim's brother rushed them, screaming and calling them murderers, and then was so stricken with grief and anger that he collapsed and then had convulsions and stuff and had to be taken to the hospital. So after it's all said and done, they were acquitted, but then they brought 23 civil suits on behalf of the victims' families. And, it was, these guys went through a lot. It was all kind of consolidated and then dragged on through 3 years of pretrial. And eventually a settlement was reached on March 11th, 1914, which is almost 3 years after the fire. And the victims' families were awarded $75 per victim, which is around 6 to 10 weeks worth of wages, which 6 to 10 weeks worth of wages now, I mean, is a decent amount, but still not enough. So
No, not even close.
Especially when you learn that Harris and Blanck collected insurance money on the whole ordeal, and they were paid just under $65,000 more than their documented property losses at the time. So they made out around $445 per victim in profit. And that's just on top of what they made already with the insurance money. So
these fires, they're really paying off.
Yeah, they're money makers. Why are we in the shirt business? Let's be in the fire business. Can we make fire? Pretty crazy, pretty wild. But these guys making all this money, you'd expect them to come out and be like, we're really sorry about all this, and we're gonna do better. No, they didn't ever come out and publicly apologize or even acknowledge it. They didn't care and did their best to keep their distance from this whole thing. So how long do you think it was before they started business back up? Obviously,
yes,
find a different place because that place.
Okay, yeah. Right. So if they found another place, I have to imagine they're back at it within 2 weeks.
Whoa. I mean, pretty close. 3 weeks. They moved over to Fifth Ave, party on Fifth Ave. They reopened the Triangle Waste Company within 3 weeks of the fire. In the summer of 1913, Blanck was arrested at the new factory, and his crime was locking a fire exit during working hours. That's crazy.
Oh.
Yeah, so he was convicted, and then he had to pay a pretty big fine, 20 whole.
That's rough.
And then the judge also apologized profusely for the inconvenience that he given him. There's no record to see if it was the same judge, but that wouldn't surprise me. Honestly, it would make sense for that guy. If it was any other
What?
judge, that would be crazy because they would know. Like,
Yeah.
you know who that guy is, dude. Um, so later that year, inspectors found conditions strikingly similar to the original factory, right down to the baskets on the wall. Um, in 1914, the pair were caught sewing counterfeit National Consumers League white labels, which were anti-sweatshop certifications, onto their products, which is
Nice.
essentially falsely claiming fair working conditions. Like, hey,
Hmm.
if you buy this thing that has this label on it, that means someone who works through a union made this. Like, that's the whole thing. And these guys completely undermined this entire operation through this. Like, they falsified. Well, I'm sure other people were doing it too, but these guys seem like they were probably one of the biggest contributors because, again, they were like the one company that didn't sign the agreement for better working conditions and, all of the fun stuff. So, and now trying to make a profit off of the movement that started in response to their fire, making money on every turn of this whole thing. But their names were not salvageable at this point. The shirtwaist trend would die out during World War I, and then the doors of their business would close and probably lock permanently in 1918. Blanck moved to California and he died there in 1942. And Harris opened a small tailor shop, just kind of working for himself. And neither of them ever spoke publicly on the disaster or had any remorse for the thing. They never even talked about it, which makes sense. I wouldn't either, I guess, because if the entire country thought I was a monster, I would never try and talk about that or bring it up. But
Oh man. So nothing happened to him.
yeah, basically
Really,
nothing happened to it. Like, yeah, they kind of died in obscurity a little bit, but like they, it was
nothing
only
bad happened to him.
after that the trend of that garment went out anyway. So whatever.
Yeah,
And they'd already made plenty of money at that point. So, uh,
presumably.
but outside of the trial, nothing happened to them. But there was a lot of investigations going on. There was a commission made to investigate factories across the state and country. And this was pretty massive with the assistance of Frances Perkins, who was one of the people who organized the first march. She served as the commission's chief investigator. And they were able to go to factories and they took tours and they would walk on catwalks and climb ladders and like go through everything, really evaluating all of the dangerous machinery and lack of safeguards and, watching children have their smoke break between shifts or whatever. And just all of these conditions. And it really shocked these commissioners who had actually worked in factories previously. They were like unaware to how bad it could be, in
Hmm.
some of the worst factories. And this commission resulted in 59 public hearings across the state, 472 witnesses, 7,000 pages of testimony, and 3,300 workplaces were inspected. And the commissioners visited 50 on their own. Fire Chief Ken Lin testified that more than 200 New York City factories had conditions that could produce another triangle-style disaster, which is good news. The commissioner also investigated beyond safety, wages, hours, child labor, occupational diseases in the manufacturing, and all of it. This whole commission ran from 1911 to 1915. It was one of the most comprehensive investigations in American history total at that point. Like, they were going through it. Justice not really served for the victims directly, but it would kind of knock the domino down and eventually things would get better. Over 60 pieces of legislation were passed between 1911 and 1914 because of this commission. Sprinklers were now required in all factory buildings above 7 floors.
Wild.
Factory exits, it must remain unlocked during working hours. That's crazy. No exceptions. So doors also must open outward. Makes sense. Panic hardware like push bars required at all emergency exits. Fire drills required. Lighted exit signs. This is where they come from because of this. They were like, here's your way to get out. They were required in New York, and then it eventually kind of took hold everywhere else. But they instituted maximum working hours for women, which was reduced to 54 hours per week. Still a lot, but better. Uh, and then children under 14 prohibited from factory work entirely. Weird. I don't know.
Hmm.
You were not allowed to smoke in factories. It seems like a smart move. Heightened ventilation standards, machine guarding requirements, sanitation standards, even. Department of Labor completely overhauled. Industrial board was created, and then given the force of like being able to influence law or be part of the law being written. And then Frances Perkins, she would go on to become FDR's Secretary of Labor, 1933, first woman in a U.S. president's cabinet. And I'm pretty sure he probably let her walk around the rest of the White House too. She held that position for 12 years, as you know. FDR he never lost an election. He was very good at them. He just kept going. And she was there for 12 years, which is this was 12 years that she was there was one of the most consequential in labor legislation in American history. And all of this, like, the Social Security Act kind of comes from this. The Wagner Act, which gave workers legal right to organize and bargain collectively. Fair Labor Standards Act, which established minimum wage, 40-hour work week, all that jazz. And also banning child labor. Again, I don't get it. They yearn for the mines. And the Department of Labor itself was created almost 2 years exactly to the day after the fire in March of 1913. National Safety Council was founded that same year. And then these things would eventually become OSHA, one of Richard Nixon's wins, 1970. He doesn't get a lot, but, every now and then you can get Tricky Dick. He got us.
Yeah, I am not a crook.
I'm not a crook. He's one of my favorite characters in Futurama, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so in 1911, we talked about the 35,000 Americans dying in workplace accidents per year, which now it's around 5,000, and we have way more people working and also a lot more big machines and stuff. So, I think the, per capita rating's a little bit better now. And obviously insurance got overhauled quite a bit. Workers' comp, we talked about that becoming a thing. It had been struck down as unconstitutional and I'm not making this up, it was struck down as unconstitutional by the New York Court of Appeals on March 1911, the day before the fire. So
Nice, man.
yeah. Yeah. So in your insurance background and all of the things that like, do you have, I don't know, like, is there, when you're going through schooling and stuff, is there like any kind of historical basis for some of the things that you learn of, like, oh, this kind of came from this, or like when a lot of the big things kind of came into play?
A lot of it is pretty surface level, but over the years, I mean, this will be in May. It'll be 15 years in
Whoa,
the insurance industry from.
we're not old.
Yeah, yeah. Don't remind me. But yeah, workers' compensation laws started on the East Coast and spread out, starting roughly 1910, right? And every state has its own workers' compensation law and statutes and parameters. Also means that like the payouts and what situations are covered vary a little bit state by
Yeah.
state. But in general, if you have employees, they got to be covered by work comp, and they're guaranteed 100% of their medical expenses covered, guaranteed ongoing like disability payments, right?
Yeah.
They can't work, a death benefit and support for your spouse or other dependents as well. It's a really good system overall. It's predicated on, yeah, you're giving up your option, your freedom to
Yeah,
not
you're right to
not
sue.
have this insurance.
Right.
Well, from the employer standpoint,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah. You're being forced now by law to get that insurance,
Yeah.
which isn't great. But what you get in return, then, as you noted,
Yeah.
you get not
Protection.
complete immunity, but pretty damn close. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be, in most states, you have to be like out there trying to intentionally hurt your employees.
Pushing dudes into acid vats like it's Gotham City or something.
Yeah, yeah, or like leaving oil baths out on your factory floor.
There's nothing wrong with a couple drums of oil next to some super flammable materials. It's fine. Okay.
There's some issues there, man. There's some issues there.
You mentioned that the workers' comp goes back to 1910. I have noted in here that the first surviving workers' comp law, meaning it didn't get struck down after it was implemented, was from Wisconsin in 1911.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was.
You go, Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was passed 6 weeks after the fire. They were like, "No, we're not doing that." Like so fast.
Well, I think the concept had been around for a few years, right?
I'm sure, yeah. And like this is the first surviving one, but I think that obviously that kind of thing plays into it. They're like, oh yeah, no, you know what? That is,
Yeah.
we got to get that going.
Yep.
We don't want to look like them. Yeah, it's passed on May 3rd, 1911, which is my dad's birthday. He wasn't born in 1911, but hey,
I didn't think Nick was that old. Yeah.
yeah, you were gonna say something. Sorry.
Oh, well, you mentioned FDR and the Fair Labor Standards Act, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you got different insurance that comes off of that then from the employer side. Any sort of issues in hiring, managing, or firing employees, right? Which
Yeah.
FLSA has a piece in that. That's for its own insurance and issues.
Yeah.
You got retirement, right? So Social Security is
Yeah.
good, but we all need more than just what Social Security is going to provide.
Right.
And so there's a bunch of insurances related to managing retirement plans. So like it goes, insurance is really like it's funny that you've called me a lawyer for so long. Insurance itself is contract law.
Right.
That's a legally binding contract. And then everything that people disagree on goes through the legal system.
Right.
And all the new insurances are because somebody got sued over something, right? Or or the new legislation that goes through on the government causes more red tape and more exposure for folks.
Yeah.
And so they got insured against that. Like
Yeah.
I'm as close to being a contract lawyer that you can be without being bar proof.
Listen, I'm not gonna say I'm a fortune teller, but
I think so.
10 more states followed in 1911, and by 1920, 42 states had adopted workers' comp. And the last of the main, the 48 was Mississippi in 1948. And, they're just a little behind the times sometimes. So,
Still are.
yeah. And then the Supreme Court upheld workers' comp in 1917. And then one of the interesting things specific to New York was the New York State Insurance Fund, which was established in 1914. It was giving employers a public mechanism to purchase workers' comp coverage, and it remains the largest workers' comp insurer in New York by market share today, which is kind of interesting. So, and then like outside of that, the fire also exposed fundamental flaws in how commercial fire insurance was, priced and monitored, overinsured. So there's a lot of within that, tighter underwriting requirements, and then policies on factories above a certain size had to require evidence of sprinkler systems as a condition of coverage. Control engineering became a standard function of commercial insurance, insurers employing engineers to inspect facilities instead of just having the guys that own the business do it. You got to have somebody who knows what they're looking at do it, which is great.
Man.
Actual cash value replaced cost coverage limitations to prevent overinsurance. And co-insurance clauses requiring policyholders to carry coverage at a minimum percentage of actual property value were standardized. So,
oh man, you're speaking my language right now. This is
I know. I'm saying a lot of words. I don't really know what most of them, but
Levi.
Yeah, insurers were given a increased ability to pursue third parties whose code violations enabled or worsened fires. Yeah, the New York City Bureau of Fire Prevention also was established in 1912. So a lot of big stuff. What that all means is that a lot of people had to die in an entirely preventable disaster to pass legislation that made people accountable for their sidestepping of rules because they wanted to make a little bit more money. Got to make a couple more pennies. Good news, companies don't do that anymore.
I was just gonna say.
Not like anybody had a clue that this fire could happen. It's not like the fire chief had predicted something like this, and even said that a building like the Ash building had the highest risk. That would be crazy. But he was ignored until the bodies were on the sidewalk. So what does he know? But a lot of safety measures taken for granted in the modern workplace. I personally have worked with many old ass boomers who are like always complaining, "Oh, true safety. Why are we making it?" It's like, hey man, it could be worse. I could just push you off the building and nobody would care. But here we are. They were only ever mad
Sure.
because it made them harder. It made well, it didn't make them harder. It made it harder for them to, take their shortcuts to make their job easier for them. Like it's just because you're lazy. You don't want to do the extra step. So,
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
yeah. The two owners, they escaped obviously with their lives and then never went to jail, barely paid any kind of anything. Well, they never paid anything. Their insurance did because they were overinsured. And then the last survivor of the fire died in 2001. Cruel irony striking again, for she was at the new undisputed workplace disaster in American history. No, she did not die at 9/11. That would be crazy. She died at the age of 107 in February of 2001. She was riding shotgun with Dale Earnhardt. No, she just died of old age. Rose Friedman was her name. And the building's still there, Washington Square Park in New York City. If you've ever seen pictures of New York City, it's the park that's got the Arc de Triomphe knockoff in it. It's also, if you've ever seen the movie I Am Legend, he lives in an apartment in that area. Anyway, this building's now called the Brown Building, and it's owned by NYU, and it's a national historical landmark. And then every year they have a ceremony on March 25th, and they ring a bell, and each victim's name is read aloud, and then everybody gets white carnations to place there, which is very, very nice that they still do something. And then obviously it's a historical landmark, so it's got a little plaque on the thing and all that. Anyway, final thoughts. What are your takeaways from all of this?
Really appreciate the insurance history
Yeah.
on this. Yeah, this is a perfect episode for me to step in.
Yeah, I
Um,
had to work it in. I was like, well, this is where I get him. He's gonna be so proud.
it's great. Yeah, and it spurred so many things
Yeah.
that are still in use today. You know, um, still a shame that it takes tragedies for lawmakers to make changes, but still true today.
Yeah. What's the old adage is like these things are written in blood, like
Mm,
how
yeah.
it's get like so many of the safety things that I've been through over the years. It was like super common when I was in the Navy because like obviously a lot of those rules are actually written in blood because
Mm,
war. But that was like I've always heard that, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of true. It takes something crazy for people to go, yeah, we probably should look at that, which is dumb. It's like you're dragging your feet on this for how long, and then you just wait till something bad happens, and they're like, yeah, no, we care about it now, obviously. So yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. This was a lot of fun, and good
Yeah.
to your particular set of skills for this.
Yeah. This was great. This was
Yeah.
great.
All right.
Appreciate you, Levi.
Thank you. And everybody listening, thanks for sticking around. And that's all I got. So, with that, keep questioning the past. The future will thank you. Bye.